So there's a new book out that takes you through the history of that group. It's called The Kids in the Hall, One Dumb Guy. It's written by Paul Myers, musician, author, and I think worth mentioning, brother to comedian Mike Myers. Yeah. And his is the first authorized biography of Kids in the Hall. I'm excited to tell you. Paul sitting across from me in the studio right now. Bruce McCulloch is stuck in traffic. He's going to be here soon.
Welcome to Toronto, I guess. It takes him a while to get here, but yeah, he's on his way.
He's on his way. Hopefully he's not stuck on the subway.
It's not a bit.
Like
I can tell you it's not a comedy bit.
So this is a he's not going to show up in costume in a couple of minutes. Oh, there he is. He's here right now.
And it's funny you should say that because he's actually walking through the door.
How about that? Yeah. We planned it really perfectly. Hey, Bruce.
It's Bruce.
Daves, I know.
It's the Bruce I know.
Hello, Tom.
Hey, man, nice to see you too. How's it going?
You're doing a great job here.
Oh, that's very
I want to say
kind
that
of
on behalf of Canada.
I appreciate
whom
that.
I speak for, of course.
He does, actually.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's kind of you. I see the Prime Minister in your pocket right now.
Yes.
Make sure to let him know. I really appreciate that.
I take him out for fun now and then.
So one of the things that stands out to me in this book is that I think, because I was just telling Paul before we turned the microphones on, that I really saw Kids in the Hall. I started watching you guys after school. Like I would come home and watch your reruns on the Comedy Network, and you seemed like this mythic group of cool Torontonians to this young Atlantic Canadian, you know? But I think when reading this book, what you learn is that you guys are just friends. You guys are just guys who got together, and you even what's the story here that you Scott Thompson ended up joining the group because you were driving down the road yelling at him after a show?
Sort of. He actually came to one of our least successful shows and threw jelly donuts at us, which was a bit from the show that we had before Oprah. I had put donuts under the seat that was part of the thing, and it was a very poorly attended show, and he started heckling us and throwing donuts at us, and then later said, "I'm going to be part of you," and we said, "Yeah, right." And of course he was.
That's very. So you Paul, I should say, like you followed Kids in the Hall in the early days. You're not an outside observer here.
No, I would say I'm not. I'm not an outside observer. No.
So what surprised you the most in writing and researching this book?
Well, just the complexity of their relationships, and also learning about their roots. Like, so you got Mark and Bruce who had met out west in Calgary, and then you've got Kevin and Dave from the suburbs of Toronto, and then Scott, who's more or less from Brampton and Thunder Bay, and they end up like converging, and they have like similar backgrounds. They all have sort of suburban angst backgrounds, except for Mark.
Well, we were all losers from the suburbs, really, in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was more a diplomatic brat. But it's funny you said that we were cool. We were and are the least cool people you'll ever meet. We were just digging a hole. It was of course I love doing the show, but
I play the auto harp and I'm on public radio, right?
I knew that. I've been exhaustively looking at your past.
Right,
yeah.
sure.
Auto harp. Wow.
Yeah, I know. So Paul, back then, like, what was the perspective of Kids in the Hall when they first started coming out, when you were going down to the Rivoli in Toronto?
Yeah, go down to the Rivoli in Toronto, and there'd be like some nights like 5 people there, but towards the end there was like always a packed house. Even during a blizzard, there would be people lining up to go to see the Kids in the Hall, and the room was electric. I mean, that's a cliche probably, but you had like Carson the bartender doing parts of the sketches with them, and they used the whole room. I thought that was fascinating that they would have lights set up in different parts of the bar, so that we
had flashlights for beat poetry.
Flashlights, you gotta love it. And it was definitely a thing where everyone felt it was a bit of a community. It was a bit of a scene. It really was like the Toronto bands, the Queen Street scene, all loved the comedy, and then there's comedy bands started up as well. So they were all kind of like everyone wanted to be on everyone else's stage.
So I want to go through the book a little bit. 4 years after forming, Kids in the Hall land their first season of the show on CBC and HBO. So take a listen to this. This is Bruce and Scott Thompson playing Kathy and Kathy, 2 office secretaries trying to figure out if their new coworker is gay.
I don't know. I just don't know.
I don't know either.
Well, he's been here 3 hours and he hasn't mentioned a girlfriend yet.
Oh, I know. Well, I have my suspicions, but you know me. I suspect most men until they prove it to me.
I can't believe you said that.
Well, I suspect some even after.
Or during.
Kathy Lassiter, I can't believe you.
So that's a clip from Kids in the Hall. Bruce, tell me the story behind those 2 characters.
Well, it's funny because we had a lot of young women who worked in the office, and we were observing them. And so we thought we have to do secretaries, and like 2 Kathys was so funny to me. And of course, that is actually, I'm playing my sister.
Oh, really?
In that, yeah, because she's so hopeful and her life is so horrible, but she's okay anyway. And so there's sort of a sing-song thing to her, ha 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 ha. and I'm playing my sister.
So one of the things we were talking about in the intro to this interview was about how groundbreaking Kids in the Hall were. I mean,
I'm glad I missed that part.
We locked the door to try and keep you out. You played women without making them the punchline. You poked fun at corporate culture before that was kind of a thing. Scott was openly gay at a time when there weren't a lot of openly gay people in comedy, and so much of this book is about how groundbreaking Kids in the Hall were at the time, but you couldn't have seen it like that at the time.
Oh no, it's like I say, we were working away in a warehouse. Like we were just doing our thing and wouldn't take a day off. We had blinders on. We just worked. And I think it was the first time we went to Detroit to do a show, and for some reason we'd sold out 500 seats. Shows.
Were you doing the show at this point? The TV
yeah, we
show
just started doing the show, and they went crazy and rushed the stage, and we went, I guess some people like us.
Right.
And so then, yeah, I think the great thing about the Kids in the Hall has always been that these outsiders, these weird, like-minded weirdos with complicated childhoods and relationships with their parents like us, and they often feel like they're the only one. And it's wonderful that I found with my life with the troupe that there's a lot of us.
So on the way in, again, we mentioned some of the people who refer to Kids in the Hall as a major influence. We mentioned Judd Apatow. We mentioned Workaholics. We mentioned, I said essentially, like I see it in SNL since the 90s. But Paul, you spoke to Fred Armisen and Judd Apatow and Samantha Bee and Seth Meyers. What were you hearing from these people?
Well, the Fred Armisen thing always blew my mind because he was saying that when they were doing Portlandia, him and Carrie and their producer Jonathan, they would talk about the director Jonathan. They would talk about like how to end a sketch, and then they'd go back and watch Kids in the Hall sketches and stuff like that. And they'd talk about, well, what would the Kids in the Hall do? And this is Fred Armisen saying this, and I'm like amazed because I had no idea. And he, much like yourself, he saw it after school as well. Like that's the generation that got into it through Comedy Central.
And we'd often say in our rooms, what would Hee-Haw do? Yeah. And we would do that.
How would Junior Sam?
Grandpa Jones would come out.
How would Zach Owens get out of this?
Yeah, and Nixon would come out and say, I'm not a crook, and everything would be out. No, that was laughing.
Yeah.
Oh, never mind. So if you're just tuning in, I'm speaking with Bruce McCulloch and Paul Myers. Bruce McCulloch of Kids in the Hall, Paul Myers, who wrote a new book about them called Kids in the Hall, One Dumb Guy. Let's play another sketch. This is from Can I Keep Him?
Mom,
Yes?
can I keep Mr. Stevenson?
Oh, Corey, sit down. Sit down. Now, Corey, a businessman is a big responsibility. You have to fetch his coffee, screen his calls, change his paper every day. I'm sorry, a businessman is too big of a responsibility for a boy your age.
Mom, I'm willing to put forth the work effort.
Oh, I think I've heard that song and dance before, young man.
So Bruce, tell me about that sketch.
Well, I went to Mount Royal College in Calgary, and I got 20%.
20%?
20%, yeah. I took business. And I think that codified my hatred of the weird hubba business thing that they walk around, and they still do it. They still talk about synergy in boardrooms and things.
Paradigm shifts.
Yes,
I hear
exactly.
that one too, yeah.
And platforms now they're talking a lot about. And it was hilarious and stupid to me. So I think I brought the obsession of the businessman in.
What an amazing content platform you guys were.
Yeah, we were. And and now we would be in so many platforms.
Oh, sorry, I missed something there. So, Paul, what did you learn about the the Kids in the Halls? How groundbreaking that was to poke fun at corporate culture in that time.
Well, I mean, the thing from talking to Bruce, I realized that there was an element to, like, it wasn't just the business. Like when they did Brain Candy, the film is about big pharma. But so it brought that business thing, but they were also like talking about the feel-good industry, you know?
Right.
So they were always kind of poking fun at the various industries that were shaping us, and like it's in a weird way you're like ad busters, you know, like corporate jamming. Like you were saying, okay, you see this around you, this is what it really looks like, and you didn't have to make much of an adjustment to make it look absurd, except maybe for the Courrier de Bois sketch where they're literally hunting and trapping the Armani jackets off the back of businessmen on Bay Street. You know?
So, Paul, why was it time to write this book now?
Well, it's coming on 30 years, and I've known them for a long time. I've written 3 other biographies, Bare Naked Ladies, Todd Rundgren, and Long John Baldry, and I got used to the idea of how to collate a lot of interviews, and then I thought, well, let's do something about someone I love. I mean, I've known this troupe since the beginning. And so I just thought this is the time to really, and they did a show in San Francisco, and they were getting along so well.
When was this?
2015.
Right.
And I finally just went, this is the time, because they're up there literally in wedding dresses. And I just sort of thought, well, this is it. They're kind of a marriage. They're brothers, you know?
Right.
and it felt like the time to make the commemoration.
Does it feel like that to you?
Without question, and I think everybody goes historically that we've fought a lot, and we were a rock band in the early days. We'd smash our guitars and say, "No, put my sketch in." But I think I have my biological family, which kind of crappy. I have my created one, but this is my other family, and we love each other now. We're very kind and tender to each other now.
So tell me about the title.
Well, it comes from something that you or Kevin, Bruce or Kevin said, and maybe you can tell it.
Well, it's like we are all individually very smart guys, but as a collective, when we get together, mostly to make decisions, we're one dumb guy.
What do you mean?
Well, we've had you're going to ask us what we're doing next, but we've had an email chain that's been going on, since for 20 years. Like collectively together as we plot our path forward, we're not so good at that. We're one dumb guy.
I think it's good in this book, though. I didn't find myself too concerned with what is the future of Kids in the Hall. I found myself really analyzing where I see Kids in the Hall now without even noticing it. So, Paul, where did you see their influence the most? Where do you see it now?
Key and Peele most recently, they're off the air now, but there's definitely a sensibility of the way they use film, and I mentioned Portlandia. And there's a lot of little troupes around America. There's a whole festival in San Francisco called Sketchfest. There's just like the Sketchfest in Toronto, but their whole thing was founded around the Kids in the Hall. They basically told me that they wanted a place for sketch comedy because there's so many troupes. So I mean, and Bruce and I were talking yesterday. There's so many troupes now in Canada, even there's a lot of untapped talent.
It's almost sad. There's an embarrassment of riches, and hopefully some of those will get on TV shortly. But it's like there is when we did it, there was 3 troupes. Us and the Frantics, kind of, and you go to Second City. Now there are so many. There's hundreds of troupes. I don't think that's just because of us, but now it feels like a choice. You can go, I can go to college, or I can start a comedy troupe, and it's beautiful. There's a lot of weird people out there making great stuff.
Well, one of the troupes that is on TV, Paul, you mentioned, is Baroness von Sketch.
Absolutely.
That got a lot from Kids in the Hall too, right?
And I was so glad that Jen Whalen of that troupe told me that for her, identifying that the Kids in the Hall were doing stuff based here made her think, wow, I can make comedy based here too. And it's so great too that, the expression "the future is female." So the future Kids in the Hall is female. And I thought that was kind of cool.
Let's play one more clip. This is from '86. We dug it up from the CBC archive. So Bruce, this is you and Mark McKinney answering a question from the CBC's Peter Downey about what your comedy is all about.
I'm sorry I did that.
Just a lot of weird stuff. Sometimes it's dark, and sometimes it's happy and sweet. And
how about
sometimes
macabre mirth makers? Is that right?
That's a nice cliche.
new.
Very
I like
good.
that.
I just made that up.
It's like the Goon Show,
Somewhat.
in that you don't know that none of this has made sense until it's over.
Some of our stuff is like, some of the stuff just never makes sense ever.
That is Bruce McCulloch and Mark McKinney with the CBC's Peter Downey in 1986. Bruce, what's it like hearing that now?
It's good. I mean, and I would probably say the same thing. Macabre mirth makers. I forgot we said that.
Yeah.
That feels like who we are.
But I do feel like one of the things I took from this book, which I really love, especially as someone who does this kind of show, that you guys didn't really talk about the quote-unquote importance of your comedy, or you didn't analyze your comedy too much. Because I think if you did it, you were worried you might split up, or you know.
Well, we never discussed the theory of comedy in the room, which drives people crazy. His brother Mike loved to discuss the theory and the chemistry.
And Foley too.
Yeah, and Foley. Well, but we never did. We never talked about the rule of threes or why something was structurally funny. We just went for ideas, because I think if it became a theoretical conversation, that's when we would start to fight.
So you would have to shut it down if it started to get into why is this funny?
Yeah, no, we would just go, it's funny, or we would just vote or something. We would or our wills, we'd punch the wall the hardest, and then our sketch would get in.
I'm speaking of your brother Mike. I didn't know he was almost a member of the troupe.
Well,
I got
mean,
that from
as much as anybody was almost a member, but there's definitely a period where I think Foley had brought him around to do some improvs at the Rivoli, and Mike wasn't sure where he was going, and there was some good energy. Actually, people said that you and Bruce and Mike got along really well in the sketches.
Well. Yeah, a good friend and a fan, and he was always there in the shadows watching us and sometimes performing it with us.
And he was jealous as hell when he saw your pilot. He says this in the book. He saw the pilot for the Kids in the Hall, and he said, "Oh my God, I've made a horrible mistake. I should have followed them." You know.
Well, it's the thing, and we find now in our as we come back together and move apart, it is lonely in this world. You look at what happened to all the SCTV people, all the Saturday Night Live people. We need, as Lauren always says, you need a home. Artists need homes, and to have a troupe is a beautiful thing. And otherwise, we're just sort of in the wind, flapping in the wind.
So there's like I said, there's a new generation of people who are discovering Kids in the Hall for the first time. You have people like me who watched it on Comedy Network, but then I was no trouble to try and find sketches yesterday on YouTube. Bruce, you told Vanity Fair that the fact that anyone still cares about our material and legacy is interesting. What do you mean?
Well, I went through a time early on when people liked our show, and it shut me down. And it was the saddest thing because I used to like to drink alone in bars, and that had to stop.
But was it also related to kind of being punk? Like, was it?
I think
you
so.
didn't want too many people to like you?
Well, at first I used to have a book, and when someone asked for my autograph, I'd take theirs too, because it's an exchange. We're just all people. But I think now that I've gotten older and I could let down my guard, I know that they're going to be playing the Daves I know at my funeral, and I'm happy with that. And I used to fear our fans but now I embrace them. So yeah, the fact that we're still reverberating for anybody is fantastic.
So Paul, last word to you then. What is it that makes the Kids in the Hall timeless?
I think it's that thing about speaking to, like you said, corporate culture and the social sort of thing, and there's still a suburban culture, and there's still a sense of who's inside, who's outside. So that stuff will be timeless, and they never dated it to any specific reference. There's no references to any particular era in the Kids in the Hall. It does have a certain through line that is not dated to one era.
Was that intentional, by the way? Was that intentional at the time? I guess it couldn't have been.
No, we just did our thing. I mean, obviously, I was really anti-parody, so we did very little of that. But no, I mean, we were sponsored by Roots, but we wouldn't wear Roots shirts, so you can't see us wearing Roots shirts on the air. So it was just, I don't know, we were just digging our own lives.
Yeah, I think that's what I loved about the book the most, because I spent a lot of time. I've learned since doing this show to stop asking so many questions about, so what does that mean that you did that? Or what does that artistic choice mean? Yeah. Because I'm learning from my own experience, but I'm learning that the best stuff is made when you just make it.
Oh yeah, and it's like when people say, where did you get that idea? I don't know. It just came into my brain. And so I think we were just digging our lives and digging them out and it worked out.
But isn't there something beautiful about that? That just like living your lives, digging out your experiences, trying stuff on, not thinking about it too much. And here we are all these years later and still kind of celebrating this.
Well,
group.
It's wonderful. It's the great joy of my life. I look at my house and I go, wow, my imagination bought me this.
Nice.
Yeah.
Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
Paul, this is a beautiful book.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It means a lot from you.
Thanks. I really appreciate you writing it and appreciate you both coming in.
Well, thank you, Tom.
Thank you. Sorry for being tardy.
It was kind of a cool moment for me, though. I got to be a cool radio guy. It was like, hey, come on in, Bruce, no problem, and we're going to answer the $1,000 quiz coming up. Just kidding. We don't have any money. The Kids in the Hall, One Dumb Guy is the first authorized biography of the sketch comedy group, and it is out now.